Hello and welcome back to the course Private Pilot Maneuvers. Now we've come quite far already. We have mastered straight and level flight and also turns in the last lessons. So what's left of the basic flight maneuvers is climbs and descents, and we'll talk about them today. So we climb or descend to change our altitude, obviously. First, we'll talk about climb. Now, to be able to climb, we need excess lift, because in straight and level flight, you have weight and lift. They're the same, so you keep your altitude. If you want to climb, we need excess lift. Of course, as soon as there is excess or more lift, there is also more drag. Additionally, now, as you climb, you also have a component of the weight. You have one component of the weight acting just to the center of the Earth, but you also have one component of the weight acting parallel to your flight path. So actually dragging your airplane back, so to speak. And together with that drag I talked about, this leads to the fact that we need more power to keep the same speed while climbing, as opposed to straight and level flight. Or we need to, with the same power, we need to fly, or we will fly at a lower speed during a climb. Now, as a pilot, you should know all the common speeds for all different climbs, like Vx, Vy, and cruise climb. We'll talk about that in a second. And also the corresponding attitudes. So how far the nose should be up, so to speak. Generally, if you fly a flatter climb, so you will probably not have as high as a climb rate, but the advantages of flying with the nose more down is, of course, that you have better engine cooling and also visibility over the nose. So if you can, it's advisable to fly a cruise climb. So this is normally done at a higher speed, let's say 80 knots or 70 to 80 knots in the Cessna 152, for example. But there are two normally slower speeds, which are important to remember, and that's Vx and Vy. Now, Vx is the speed for the best angle of climb. So this is giving me the highest altitude gain in the shortest distance. So when do we need this? Well, pretty obviously when we want to clear obstacles that are close by. So a very common scenario where we will fly Vx is right after takeoff, when we have obstacles just behind the runway. So we want to gain as much altitude as we can in the shortest possible distance. And in the Cessna 152, the speed is 55 knots, for example. Check your pilot's operating handbook what the speed is for your airplane. And then there is Vy. Now, Vy is the speed for maximum rate of climb. So the highest altitude gain in the shortest time. We'll often fly this speed after we have cleared the obstacles. For example, we can accelerate to Vy until we have reached a really safe altitude, and then we could accelerate to the cruise climb speed, for example. Now the speeds change with altitude. For example, Vy in the Cessna 152 is 67 knots at sea level. But it gets lower. It's 61 knots only at 10,000 feet. All right. So generally, actually with increasing altitude, as I've said before, Vy decreases and Vx actually increases. Now in the Cessna 152, however, there's just one Vx published, and that's the 55 knots. This brings us actually to the term of the absolute ceiling of the airplane. The absolute ceiling of the airplane is actually where Vx and Vy, where the speed graphs intersect. You can see that in the image behind me. actually to my right. And the absolute ceiling is where the airplane simply cannot climb anymore. So even if you tried, this is the maximum altitude that you can reach in this airplane. And then there is a second term, which is called the service ceiling, which is often included in the pilot's operating handbook. And this is actually depending on certification standards and so on, but normally for propeller airplanes, this means this is the altitude where the airplane is only capable of climbing at 100 feet per minute anymore. So you can still climb, but very, very slowly. And of course, the service ceiling is always below the absolute ceiling. Okay, so how do we establish a climb? We increase the back pressure on the yoke or stick to increase our pitch attitude, to increase angle of attack and lift. And at the same time, we adjust the power. So we set climb power with the throttle. Normally, as long as you do not have to keep a specific climb rate for any reason, we fly with a fixed power setting, and that's climb power. So just check your pilot's operating handbook on that. So in the Cessna 152, it's normally just full power. And we keep the speed with the elevator. So the power is fixed. And if you want to slow down, we pull back. And if you want to get faster, we put the nose down a little bit. Now, of course, to maintain the same speed as in cruise flight, I need more power. Otherwise, I will have to live with the decrease in speed, of course, if I leave the power the same. So normally during a climb, some speed has to be given up. Also keep in mind that with normally aspirated engines, like in the Cessna 152 or in many basic trainers, so they have no turbocharger. This means that with the decreasing air density, with higher altitudes, also the power output of the engine decreases. So if you do a long climb, let's say from, from sea level to 10,000 feet, you need to adjust your power accordingly, because you will suffer a decrease in manifold pressure or RPM, depending on what instrument you have installed in your airplane. The Cessna 152 just has an RPM gauge, but in the 152 it's not really well, you cannot do much about this because you're normally climbing with full power anyway, so there's nothing to adjust. The throttle lever will just stay full forward. Also, be prepared to use right rudder with your feet during climb. Now, why? Because there are several so-called propeller effects that actually want to turn the airplane to the left, and this has to be counteracted with right rudder. If you don't do that, this will cause a lot of drag, and this will reduce your climb rate. And again, like with coordination in a turn, you normally can get away without it, but it's just not pretty. And well, you're robbing yourself of performance actually. Now, first of the propeller effects is the P factor. And the P factor is caused by the propeller, of course, and the descending plate of the propeller. Now, I'm just talking about, well, the most common configuration, I'd say, in basic trainer airplanes is that the propeller, as seen from the pilot, is turning clockwise to the right. So the descending propeller blade will be on the right. And the descending propeller blade actually produces more lift, it's a higher angle of attack than the ascending blade, and therefore, and it's on the right, so it wants to turn the plane to the left. But why does it have a higher lift? Well, as with many situations, I find it helpful to look at the extreme case of climb, and that would be if you want to climb straight up. That's not going to work in most basic airplanes. But it's nice to look at this to understand P factor, because now it's pretty obvious that this blade now is not actually going, it's not the downward going blade, but actually the forward going blade. And of course it's going forward into the airstream, so it has more airstream around it, so it produces more lift. And this is the same. The effect is the same if you're just not going straight up, but just in some climb attitude. Of course, it's less pronounced then, but it's still there. So it's going to push me to the left, and I need right rudder. So this happens actually as soon as you have a positive pitch angle. Then there is torque. This is simply due to the propeller rotation. Propeller turns to the right. Now, as the opposite reaction, the airplane wants to turn to the left. That's the second propeller factor. And the third is the spiraling slipstream. Again, due to the propeller's rotation, you have air spiraling around the airplane. It's actually then hitting the vertical fin, pushing the tail to the right and the nose to the left. So all those things want to turn my nose to the left. So I need right rudder to compensate for that. Now, also the most perfect climb will come to an end sometime. So to level off again, just keep in mind that depending on your vertical speed, to do it in time. So a good rule of thumb here is to lead the level off with about 10% of your climb rate. So if you climbing towards your target altitude with 500 feet per minute, then start your level off 50 feet before. Also keep in mind that if you are already performance limited because you're already at a high altitude in a normally aspirated engine, you don't have much climb rate. If you are turning, this will get even worse, as we have discussed in the turning lesson. Now, what are the common errors during a climb actually? It's actually, first of all, establishing the climb attitude by chasing the airspeed. So just pulling up and seeing what the speed does. Oh, speed is too low, down again, nose up and down. So you should really know your approximate climb attitude for Vx, Vy, for a cruise climb, and then set this attitude. And then wait. The speed will probably more or less then adjust itself. And then, of course, you need small corrections. But don't chase the airspeed needle. Just very consciously set your climb attitude first and then do your small adjustments for speed. Another common error, of course, is not using right rudder during climbs. It's often forgotten and it's actually reducing your climb rate again. Also, like in turns, that people fixate on the nose in judging their bank angle. So always also look at your wingtips to see if you are straight and level. Also, a common error is, of course, this happens more often in higher performance airplanes, is to leveling off too late and then overshooting the altitude and then needing to dive down to get it, and then this often leads to the next error, applying too much forward pressure than in an attempt to stop the climb rapidly and thereby inducing negative G's. Well, normally an airplane is certified for a certain amount of negative G, but there are quite some airplanes where, according to the pilot's operating handbook, it's still prohibited to introduce any intentional negative G's. So just be aware of that.